Having gone over the idea of domain restrictions, it's time to get our feet wet with actual rational equations. And if you remember the procedure that we went over in class, there's a couple of steps to these things, which I will remind you again as we're going through this problem. I want to go over these two equations right here. They're just sort of starter equations. So let's just get into it. When I have this thing, the problem with it is that I've got variables on top and bottom of a fraction. So the first thing I want to do is at least make sure that all the fractions are equal in their denominators. See right here, I have a denominator that's not equal to the denominator of that one. 6 doesn't even have a denominator. So let's write this over again. And I want equal denominators everywhere, or common denominators. So I'm going to say negative 5 delta plus 7 over 4 delta plus 1. Now, you can see that the factor the left side is missing is this 4 delta plus 1 thing. Okay, that's the missing denominator from the left side. So I'm going to multiply the left side by a crazy 1. And that is just going to be 4 delta plus 1 over 4 delta plus 1. And if you remember from adding rationals, this is the same idea. We're not changing the value of this number. We're just changing what it looks like. We're changing the form it's in. So now we can rewrite this a little bit. We're going to say 6 times 4 delta plus 1 over 4 delta plus 1 equals negative 5 delta plus 7 over 4 delta plus 1. And now here's a special trick that you can do with rational equations, which you cannot do when you're just adding up rationals. The reason we can do this special trick is because of this wonderful symbol here. That equal sign lets us get away with all sorts of nonsense that we couldn't do with regular fractions. Here's what you get to do. You just get to cross out everything that's on the bottom. As long as you're crossing out both sides of the equation's denominators, you can do it. And those denominators have to be equal. So now look what we get. A much simpler equation. 6 times 4 delta plus 1 equals negative 5 delta plus 7. And the actual trick that we're using to justify this is multiplication. We're multiplying both sides by the same 4 delta plus 1, but you might as well just remember it, cross out the denominators, however you like it. In any case, now we just simplify this by collecting all our like terms together. So we have 24 delta plus 6 equals negative 5 delta plus 7. Move things over, so we have 29 delta on this side and 1 over there, so delta equals 1 over 29. Okay, that's it. We're done, right? Not quite. There's one thing we have to be sure of. We're dealing with rational equations, remember? So every time you're solving one of these equations, I want you to look at this denominator right here and think, okay, that means 4 delta plus 1 cannot be 0. Because if it is, then we have a domain restriction. So balance that equation and we get 4 delta cannot equal negative 1. So delta cannot equal negative 1 over 4. So is that okay? Compare the domain restriction to your solution. Looks fine to me. So we're done. We can move on. Next one. 5 over 6 phi equals 7 over phi minus 2/3. So I'm going to look at the denominators here, and I notice that they're not the same. I want them to all be the same. So let's try to rewrite this. 5 over 6 phi is just going to stay where it is. 7 over phi, well, what is that missing? It's missing a factor of 6. So we're going to multiply this by 6 over 6. It's another crazy one. And 2 over 3, what's that missing? Well, what does it take to turn 3 into 6 phi? You have to multiply it by 2 phi. And if you just think about it, 3 times 2 phi equals 6 phi. So we'll have common denominators again. So let's just make sure of everything. 7 times 6 is 42, and that's over 6 phi. And 2 times 2 phi is 4 phi. And 3 times 2 phi is 6 phi. Yep, there's all my common denominators. And now I get to go through here and do my favorite thing, which is just cross them all out and move on with a much simpler equation, which is 5 equals 42 minus 4 phi. I'm going to rearrange this a little bit. bring the 4 phi over here, the 5 over to the other side. I get 4 phi equals 37. So phi equals 37 over 4. Not done yet. Don't go away. We still need to check domain restrictions. These are easy, right? It's just 6 times a variable. I'll use this one as an example. Let's see. Here. This right here tells me that phi cannot be 0. Okay? It's fine, because I think phi equals 37 over 4. Let's check out the next one. 6 phi. Well, 6 phi can't be 0. See, that's really the same thing as phi can't equal 0, because we're going to divide each side by 6. Okay? Still fine. So that is our answer. Everything looks good.